representing the State University of New York at Potsdam, and we'll be discussing the pharmaceutical industry, specifically the drug compounding crisis. On today's agenda, we'll be discussing what the drug compounding crisis is. We'll be giving you a real-life story to help put the compounding crisis in perspective for you. We'll be discussing the New England Compounding Center, which is the primary company that we'll be discussing in our case today. We'll be discussing the ethical issues surrounding this case, and then we'll briefly touch up on the financial and legal issues. And lastly, we'll summarize by giving you a recommendation of our case in general. So the drug compounding crisis, what exactly is it? Drug compounding originally started to make a customized drug on a per patient basis. There's traditional drug compounding and non-traditional drug compounding. Traditional drug compounding is exactly what I just said. It was used to customize a drug on a per patient basis. Today, you see a lot of companies, a lot of compounding centers using non-traditional drug compounding. This is essentially creating copycats of FDA approved drugs. There's various different risks with that, which is what our case will touch up on today. The case today that we are discussing is about the New England Compounding Center, which is a compounding facility located out of the state of Massachusetts. The compounding facility actually produced a back injection steroid that was used to commonly treat lower back pain. And because of the lack of quality control in the facility, a strain of fungal meningitis was introduced into the batch. They actually distributed over 17,000 vials of the back injection and over 19 different states. And up to today, over 50 people have died because of this, and over 700 people have been affected. And the case is still ongoing today, and more people have been getting affected. And I'll turn it over to Monica now, who will talk about the company in general.
Thank you, Rashida. The New England Compounding Center was listed as a medical compound-only pharmacy based in Massachusetts, as Rashida has mentioned. And the purpose of this company was to create customized medications on a per-patient basis for patients that either have drug allergies or just did not have any effect on the FDA-approved drug that they had originally been given. And now that you know more details about the company itself, I'll pass it to Lauren, who will give us some real-life examples.
Thank you, Monica. We have George Carey, who is a native in Michigan. He and his wife Lillian both last August went to the doctors for a steroid shot, which was injected into their lower back for some lower back pain they were experiencing. By late September, his wife Lillian was on life support, suffered a severe stroke, and shortly after that, George Carey himself had to make the decision to take his wife off of life support. Just imagine that for a second, taking your own wife or your husband or your significant other off of life support. He feels as though he's lost his best friend, his partner in crime, his lifelong partner, and he is sitting watching the clock every single day to see if he's gonna have the same symptoms that his wife once had, and he doesn't know if he's gonna wake up tomorrow morning. And I will now pass this back to Monica with the ethical issues on this case.
So there's a difference between a compound-only pharmacy versus a drug manufacturing company. The New England Compounding Center listed itself as a compound-only, but it was operating as a drug manufacturing company, which was outside of its scope of practice. And so the compounding center has a lot more relaxed regulations versus a drug manufacturing company who is under the microscope constantly from the FDA, and everything that comes out of a drug manufacturing company must be FDA approved. And each company does not have to have a specific code of conduct, because there's a statewide recognized code of conduct, and Massachusetts has the strictest of the nation. Clearly, the New England Compounding Center did not comply with this code of conduct of Massachusetts. The Pharmacy Compounding Accreditation Board is referred to find compounding centers that are devoted to quality, and clearly the New England Compounding Center was not devoted to quality, neither was it accredited by this board. Finally, the FDA's part in this, the FDA didn't have much of an influence on the New England Compounding Center because it was a compound only, and the FDA knew what was going on in this company for 10 years and did nothing, virtually nothing, to fix this crisis. The one thing that they did do is in 2006, they sent a warning letter to the New England Compounding Center, but the New England Compounding Center blew it off and nothing was enforced. Which brings me to the main ethical issue that that is at hand, which is the blatant negligence of the New England Compounding Center, along with other stakeholders such as the owners and partially the doctors and hospitals and clinics that administered this drug. And now I'll pass it to Rashida, who will cover the legal aspects of this case.
I'll briefly cover the legal implications of this case as they contribute to the ethical portion as well. Something to keep in mind is in 1999, less than a year after the New England Compounding Center opened its doors in 1998, they received a citation from the state of Massachusetts for having blank prescription pads within the facility. These blank prescription pads were used to send bulk shipments of drugs to hospitals and other facilities under the names of John Doe or Homer Simpson, which is definitely violating the state of Massachusetts regulations for drug compounding. The New England Compounding Center also violated FDA regulations as well. According to section 503A of the FDA Code of Conduct, compounding facilities can produce bulk quantities of drugs in limited amounts. To clarify this point a little further, the FDA, the New England Compounding Center actually was allowed to produce and manufacture drugs if they had a patient that required it on a constant basis. However, the New England Compounding Center failed to actually have patients to send out the drugs to. In fact, they just produced bulk quantities and shipped it out to hospitals, and they didn't follow a lot of the protocol that they were supposed to follow. And I'll pass it on to Lauren for some of the financial issues.
Thank you, Rashida. So the New England Compounding Center has filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. Previous to this, in 2010, they had $20 million in profits, and then in 2012, they had $32 million in profits with a quarter of that year left. Barry Cadden and his wife Lisa were spending way too freely on the company credit cards, Starbucks, Dave & Buster's, jewelry stores, any store you can think of, you name it, they were there spending on themselves. He was also receiving an $18,000 bi-weekly salary. Both of them could have been using all of this profit to keep the facility clean that they were working out of, for the fact that maybe that George Carey wouldn't have to suffer with his symptoms now, or his wife wouldn't have passed away, and all of these different things they could have done differently. It comes down to greed, getting sloppy, and simply just not caring about anybody but themselves. And I will now pass this back to Rashida with the recommendations on how we should handle this.
Thanks, Lauren. Something to keep in mind with an issue like this is, although we want to point the finger at the New England Compounding Center, they are not the primary party. There are various different parties that work together to kind of make a crisis like this occur. And one of those, it's a new FDA, as well as the state of Massachusetts, who also showed negligence on their part that ensured that crisis like this actually happened. The FDA actually failed to actually follow up with the investigations that they did, and to make sure that the violations that the New England Compounding Center had did not occur. And the state of Massachusetts is in the same boat. They had inspections of the facility, they found violations, but they never followed up with those violations to make sure that they did not occur again. Which brings me to the first of the two recommendations that we have on this case. The first recommendation that we have is to have stricter nationwide FDA regulations on all compounding facilities. This would include having more frequent investigations of the compounding facilities within the United States, as well as making sure that the violations that they had are fixed. And if they are not fixed, the FDA should in fact make sure that the facilities that violated the regulations are either put on probation or shut down completely. Because after all, we are talking about human lives. There's been 50 lives that have already lost. You don't know in the following months how many more are going to be lost. And I would also like to bring to your attention that although we have covered the New England Compounding Center in this case, it is not only the New England Compounding Center that has had these violations. Just last month, there was an article that said that 30 other compounding centers in the United States have had violations similar to this. They just have not had something that has affected such a mass quantity of people and led to so many deaths. The New England Compounding Center has a sister company actually run by Barry Cadden's brother-in-law that also has had various citations, also located in Massachusetts, the strictest state for compounding centers, and there's still nothing being done about this, which leads me to my next point, and just to tell you guys how serious of an issue this is and that we should get a firmer grip on the compounding centers. Thank you.
Thank you.